Part 1. The morning sun rose over Academy, painting the white towers in shades of gold and pink. The school sat on a hill overlooking a city of crystal and light, where beings from 100 different worlds lived and worked together. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It was everything the Galactic Cooperative had promised when they built it 4 centuries ago. Ambassador Ani stood at her office window, watching students walk across the courtyard below. Her green scales caught the light as she turned to look at the report on her desk. The words glowed on the screen, but she did not need to read them again. She had memorized every line. The great experiment was failing. For years, the cooperative had worked to bring young people from different species together. They believed that if children learned beside each other, they would grow to understand each other. Fear would fade, trust would grow, the galaxy would become a better place. But some fears ran too deep. Ani's claws tapped against the glass as she watched a small figure cross the courtyard alone. Even from this distance, she could recognize by the way she walked. Humans moved differently from other species. Their steps were heavy and sure, their bodies balanced in a way that spoke of a world with stronger gravity. They looked soft, these humans, with their thin skin and flat faces, but looks could be deceiving. Had arrived 3 standard months ago. She was the first human student in the Academy's history, and her presence had caused more problems than Ani had expected. Not because it was difficult. The opposite was true. She was polite and eager to learn. She helped other students with their studies. She asked thoughtful questions in class. She smiled at everyone she met. The problem was not. The problem was what she represented. Earth was a Category 7. The classification system went from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most dangerous. Most civilized species came from worlds rated between 1 and 3. Pleasant places with mild weather, gentle seasons, and few predators. For example, was a Category 2. It had soft breezes, warm oceans, and forests that glowed with gentle light. Nothing on that world wanted to kill you. Earth was different. Earth had earthquakes that could level cities. It had storms that tore buildings apart. It had deserts where the heat could cook you alive and frozen wastelands where you could freeze to death in minutes. The water was full of parasites. The plants could be poison. The animals ranged from annoying to deadly, and sometimes both at once. And the humans, they had survived all of it. They had not just survived. They had conquered their world, built civilizations, and reached for the stars. They were tough, adaptable, and impossible to kill. They were also, according to some reports, violent beyond measure. Ani had read those reports. She had seen the statistics on human wars, human crimes, human cruelty. She had also seen the other statistics, the ones about human charity, human art, human love. The truth was complicated. Humans were complicated. But many in the cooperative did not want complicated truths. They wanted simple stories, and the simplest story was that humans were dangerous. Believed that story with all his heart. Ani watched as crossed the courtyard from the other direction. He was like most of the wealthy students at the academy. His skin was pale blue, his eyes were large and dark, and his movements were graceful in the way of someone who had never known hardship. His family had money and influence. His grandfather had been a famous merchant captain. His future was bright and certain. But something dark lived in his heart. The family had suffered during the Fringe Wars 50 years ago. Human pirates had raided their shipping routes, destroying 3 vessels and nearly bankrupting the dynasty. His grandfather had barely escaped with his life. He had spent his remaining years telling stories about the human monsters who had attacked him, about their cruelty and savagery. Those stories had passed down to his children and had grown up hating humans. He had never met one, but he knew what they were: predators, killers, beasts in a thin disguise of civilization. And now one of them walked the halls of his school, smiled at his friends, and pretended to be their equal. He could not accept it. He would not. Ani sighed and turned away from the window. She had tried talking to his parents. Nothing had worked. The boy was convinced that was a threat, and he had made his feelings known through cold words and cruel looks. So far, nothing more. But Ani could feel that something was building. She just did not know when it would break. Today, as it turned out, Professor's classroom was on the third floor of the main building. It was a wide room with high windows and seats arranged in a circle around a central podium. The professor herself was a member of a species called the, not to be confused with Ambassador Ani despite the similar name. Professor had 4 eyes, 2 mouths, and a body covered in soft gray fur. She taught history, which was a fancy way of saying she taught students about how different species had learned to live together. Today's lesson was about the Accords, a famous treaty that had ended a century of conflict between 2 major species. It was dry material, full of names and dates and political details. Most students struggled to stay awake. Sat in the front row as she always did. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the standard academy uniform with its silver buttons and blue trim. She had a tablet in front of her, and she was taking notes with a focused expression. She looked like any other student except for the small details that marked her as human. The way she breathed, slow and steady. The way she held her pen, with fingers that had evolved to grip tools and weapons. The way her eyes moved, always watching, always aware. Sat in the back row, he was not taking notes, he was watching. He had made his decision 3 days ago when he had overheard her laughing with a group of students in the dining hall. She had been telling them about Earth, about something called a summer camp, where human children learned to survive in the wilderness. The other students had been fascinated. They had asked questions and laughed at her stories. They had treated her like she was normal. She was not normal. She was a monster and was the only one who could see it. He had brought his great-grandfather's knife. It was a ceremonial blade passed down through generations of the family. The edge was still sharp, even after 200 years, had never used it for anything except display. He did not really know how to fight, but he believed that when the moment came, instinct would take over. Professor droned on about the 3rd clause of the Accords. His heart pounded in his chest. His fingers tightened around the knife hidden in his sleeve. Now he thought, it has to be now. He stood. His chair scraped against the floor with a sound that cut through the professor's lecture. Every head in the room turned toward him. Professor's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. Her mouth parts clicked, a sign of concern. Is something wrong? Did not answer her. He stepped out of his row and walked toward the center of the room. His hand pulled the knife from his sleeve, and the blade caught the light from the windows. Several students gasped. Others ducked beneath their desks. A girl near the door let out a high-pitched cry of fear. Did not move. She sat in her seat, her pen still in her hand, and watched approach. Your kind does not belong here, said. His voice was shaking, but he forced the words out. You are predators, monsters. I have read the reports about your world, the murder rate, the wars, the violence that runs through your blood like poison. He pointed the knife at her. How long before that nature comes out? How long before one of us becomes your prey? The room was silent. Professor seemed frozen at her podium, unable to process what was happening. Security would come eventually, but the academy had never needed fast response times. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Looked at the knife. She looked at its trembling hand. She looked at his face, pale blue and twisted with fear and anger. And she smirked. It was not a mocking expression, though saw it that way. It was the tired smile of someone who had faced this moment before, in different forms, in different places. The smile of someone who understood that the real enemy was not the boy with the blade, but the fear that drove him. A knife, she said quietly. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. That is what you brought to threaten me. His arm wavered. Stay back, I know what your species can do. Did not stay back. She rose from her seat, slowly and deliberately, her movements careful and unthreatening. She was shorter than, lighter than him, softer than him, but something in her eyes made him step backward. Do you know, she asked, do you really know what it means to come from a She took another step forward, retreated again. "Let me tell you," she said. And the lesson began. Part 2. His voice was soft, but it carried through the silent room. Every student watched her. Every breath was held. The knife in his hand seemed smaller now, less important, as if the world had shifted and left it behind. "You think you know about Earth," said. "You have read reports. You have heard stories. You have seen numbers on screens that tell you how many humans died in wars, how many killed each other, how many suffered." She paused. "But numbers are not the same as understanding." His grip on the knife tightened. "I know enough. Your kind is violent, dangerous. You should never have been allowed into civilized space." "Civilized," repeated. The word hung in the air between them. "Tell me, what makes a species civilized? Is it the absence of violence? Is it beautiful cities and gentle manners?" "Yes," said, though his voice was uncertain. "Yes, that is what it means." Shook her head slowly. "Then no species in the galaxy is civilized, not even the—" A ripple of surprise moved through the classroom. They were considered the most refined species in the cooperative. Their art was famous. Their music was legendary. Their manners were studied and throughout known space. "They had wars," continued. "Your history books talk about the century of sorrow when 3 nations fought for control of the northern continent. Millions died, cities burned, families were torn apart." She looked at with something like sympathy. "Violence is not unique to humans. Every species that has ever built a civilization has also built weapons. Every species that has ever loved has also hated. That is not a human failing. It is the price of being alive." His arm was shaking now. The knife wavered in his grip. "That was different. We evolved past it. We became better." "Did you, or did you just become comfortable?" Took another step forward. "Your world is gentle. Your weather is mild. Your predators are small. You have never had to fight for survival the way humans have. You have never had to look at a world that wanted to kill you and say, 'No, I will live anyway.'" She was close enough now that could see the details of her face. Her skin was strange, covered in tiny pores and fine hairs that they did not have. Her eyes were round, with dark centers that seemed to absorb the light. She was alien in every way, and yet there was something familiar in her expression. Something that looked almost like understanding. "Let me tell you about Earth," she said. "Let me tell you what the reports do not say." Did not answer. He could not. His throat was tight and his thoughts were spinning. This was not how the confrontation was supposed to go. She was supposed to be afraid. She was supposed to beg or run or attack. She was not supposed to stand there calmly and talk to him like he was a frightened child. Because that is what he was, realized. A frightened child who had been taught to hate something he did not understand. "Earth is a world where the sun can give you cancer if you stay outside too long," she said. "The radiation breaks down your cells and turns them against you. We have to protect ourselves with special creams and clothing, and even then, it is not always enough. Humans die from sunlight, from the same light that warms us and helps our plants grow." She took another step, retreated until his back touched a desk. "The water on Earth can kill you too. There are parasites so small you cannot see them, and they swim into your body and eat you from the inside. There are bacteria that turn a simple cut into a death sentence. There are creatures in the ocean that can sting you and stop your heart in minutes." She paused. "And that is just the water. The land is worse." Professor made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whisper. She had studied human biology, but hearing it described this way was different. It made Earth sound like a nightmare. "We have insects that drink blood and spread disease," continued. "We have plants that cause blisters if you touch them and other plants that can kill you if you eat them. We have animals that hunt us for food. Bears, lions, sharks, crocodiles. We share our world with predators that see us as prey, and we have for millions of years." She stopped walking. She was arm's length from now, close enough that he could have reached out and touched her, close enough that he could have used the knife. He did not move. "Do you know what we did?" asked. "Do you know how we survived a world that tried to kill us in 1,000 different ways?" Shook his head. His eyes were wide, and his second heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. "We worked together," said. "We formed groups and tribes and families. We protected each other. We shared food when times were hard and shelter when storms came. We told stories around fires to keep the darkness away. We loved each other. That is the secret of humanity, not our violence, our love." "Love," repeated. The word sounded strange in his mouth, wrong somehow when applied to humans. "Yes, love." His voice was gentle now, almost sad. "We love so deeply that it terrifies us. We love our families, our friends, our communities. We love strangers we have never met, people on the other side of the world whose names we will never know. We see someone suffering and something inside us breaks a little. We cannot help it. We are built that way." She reached out slowly, giving him time to react, time to pull away. Her hand moved toward the knife, toward his trembling fingers. "We even love our enemies," she said. "Not always, not perfectly, but we try. We build hospitals for wounded soldiers on both sides of a war. We send food to countries that hate us. We forgive people who have hurt us because holding onto anger is too heavy a burden to carry forever." Her hand touched his. Her skin was warm, warmer than skin, and softer than he expected. She did not grab the knife. She did not try to take it. She simply rested her fingers over his, gentle as a whisper. "I know you are scared," she said. "Your grandfather told you stories about human pirates who attacked his ships. He told you we were monsters who killed without mercy. And some humans are like that. Some humans do terrible things, but so do some. So do some members of every species in the galaxy. Violence is not our identity, it is our tragedy." His grip on the knife loosened. His arm dropped to his side. The blade hung there, useless and forgotten. "I am not those pirates," said. "I did not attack your grandfather. I was not even born when the Fringe Wars happened. I am just a girl who grew up on a difficult world and dreamed of seeing the stars. I came here to learn about the galaxy, to meet people from other species, to understand things I could never understand on Earth alone." She paused. "I came here hopping to make friends, not enemies." Tears gathered in his eyes. He blinked them away angrily, embarrassed by the weakness. "You should hate me," he said. "I threatened to kill you. I called you a monster in front of everyone." "Yes," agreed, "you did. Then why are you being kind to me?" Smiled. It was not the smirk from before, but something gentler, something that transformed her alien features into something almost beautiful. "Because kindness is what humans do," she said. "When we are at our best anyway, when we remember what we survived and why." Her fingers squeezed his, light and brief. "Because hating you will not fix anything. It will not change your mind or heal your grandfather's wounds or make the galaxy safer. But kindness might, understanding might, patience might." The knife fell from his hand. It clattered against the floor, spinning once before coming to rest. The sound broke the spell that had held the classroom frozen. Students began to breathe again. Professor sagged against her podium. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to ring as security finally responded. But in the center of the room, two young people stood facing each other. One was an alien with blue skin and dark eyes, his whole body shaking with emotions he did not understand. The other was a human from a soft and strange and impossible to predict. "I do not understand you," whispered. "I know," said, "but maybe someday you will." She stepped back, giving him space, and returned to her seat. She picked up her pen and looked at Professor, who was still standing frozen at the podium. "I believe you were discussing the third clause of the Accords," said calmly. "Something about mutual recognition of territorial boundaries." Professor stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she laughed. It was a strange sound, clicking and chittering, but unmistakably a laugh. "Yes," the professor said. "Yes, I was." She looked at the knife on the floor, at standing lost and confused at the students slowly emerging from beneath their desks. Perhaps we should take a short break first. The security officers arrived 30 seconds later. They found a classroom in chaos, a knife on the floor, and a human girl taking notes as if nothing had happened. The lesson for now was over. Part 3. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. Security officers interviewed every student in the classroom. Counselors met with and his family. Diplomats sent messages back and forth between the academy and a dozen different governments. The future of human integration into the cooperative hung in the balance. Ambassador Ani spent most of that time in meetings. She argued with angry parents who demanded that be expelled for provoking the attack. She argued with human representatives who wanted prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. She argued with academy officials who thought the whole situation should be buried and forgotten. Through it all, remained calm. She attended her classes. She ate her meals. She studied in the library and walked through the gardens and acted as if nothing had changed. But Ani noticed that she walked alone more often now. Other students kept their distance, unsure whether to treat her as a hero or a threat. The disciplinary hearing was held in the Grand Council Chamber, a vast room with high ceilings and walls covered in historical murals. Representatives from 12 species sat in a semicircle, their faces arranged in expressions of serious concern. Sat at a small table in the center, his parents behind him. He looked smaller than usual, as if the weight of his actions had compressed him somehow. Sat at another table, alone. No human representative had arrived in time to support her. She was one small figure against the might of the cooperative's bureaucracy. The council leader, a massive creature called Elder, began the proceedings. Her voice was deep and formal. "We are gathered to discuss the incident in Professor's classroom. The accused of the did bring a weapon onto academy grounds and did threaten a fellow student with violence. These are serious charges. The penalty could include expulsion, criminal prosecution, and permanent marks on his record." His mother made a soft sound of distress. His father's jaw tightened. "However," Elder continued, "before we render judgment, we will hear testimony from the victim of this incident. Of Earth, please approach." Rose from her seat and walked to the center of the room. She stood straight, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes meeting Elder's without flinching. "You have been wronged," the Elder said. "A fellow student threatened your life with a deadly weapon. You have every right to demand the harshest punishment. What do you wish to say?" Was quiet for a moment. She looked at who could not meet her eyes. She looked at his parents, their faces tight with fear. She looked at the council members, waiting to deliver their verdict. "I wish to speak in defense of," she said. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Elder's expression shifted from formal neutrality to genuine surprise. "You wish to defend him, the one who threatened to kill you?" "Yes," his voice was steady. "Because he is not a criminal, he is a victim." More murmurs. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion. "A victim of what?" Elder asked. "Of fear," said, "of ignorance, of stories passed down through generations until they became more real than reality." She turned to face the council fully. His grandfather was attacked by human pirates 50 years ago. He lost ships, crew members, and nearly his life. He spent his remaining years telling his family about the monsters who had hurt him. He was not lying. To him, humans were monsters. That was his truth. She paused, letting the words settle. "Grew up with those stories. He never met a human before me. Everything he knew about my species came from his grandfather's fear and pain. He believed, truly believed, that I was dangerous, that I would hurt someone eventually, that it was only a matter of time before the monster inside me emerged." "And so he attacked you first," Elder said. "That does not excuse his actions." "No," agreed. "It does not excuse them, but it explains them. And understanding the reason for a wrong action is the first step toward fixing it." She turned to look at. He met her eyes this time, though his face was pale. "Did not want to hurt me," she said. He wanted to protect his classmates from a threat that only existed in his imagination. He was wrong, completely, terribly wrong. But his intention was not evil. It was misguided. She turned back to the council. Punishing him harshly will not change his beliefs. It will confirm them. He will spend the rest of his life thinking that humans destroyed his future because he dared to stand against us. He will become bitter and angry, and more convinced than ever that we are the monsters his grandfather described. Elder leaned forward. "What would you suggest instead?" "Education," said. "Real education, not the kind you get from reports and statistics. Needs to understand humans, not as a species but as individuals. He needs to see that we laugh and cry and dream and fear, just like everyone else. He needs to learn that the pirates who attacked his grandfather were criminals, not representatives of all humanity." The council members exchanged glances. Some looked skeptical, others seemed thoughtful. "How would this education be provided?" Elder asked. Smiled. It was a small smile, almost shy. "I would like to teach him myself." The chamber erupted in noise. Council members spoke over each other. Parents looked shocked. Himself stared at as if she had grown a second head. Elder raised a hand for silence. When the noise faded, she spoke carefully. "You wish to personally educate the student who threatened your life?" "Yes." "Why?" Considered the question. She thought about Earth, about the that had shaped her. She thought about all the times humans had chosen revenge over reconciliation, and all the times they had chosen forgiveness over hate. She thought about the long, hard work of building trust between enemies. "Because that is what we do," she said finally. "Humans, I mean. When we have been hurt, we have a choice. We can hurt back or we can heal. Both paths are open to us. Both are part of our nature." She looked at. "I choose to heal. I choose to believe that can learn and change and become better than his fear, and I am willing to do the work to help him get there." The council deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they reached a compromise. Was suspended for 1 semester. He would be required to complete 100 hours of community service. He would also attend weekly sessions during which she would teach him about human culture, history, and values. It was not the harsh punishment some had wanted. It was not the complete forgiveness others had hoped for, but it was a chance for understanding, a chance for change. The first session was awkward. Sat on one side of a small table, sat on the other. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally broke the silence. "I still do not understand you." "I know," said. "You should want revenge. You should want me to suffer." "Maybe." Reached into a bag she had brought and pulled out a small container. Inside were round brown objects, still warm. "But wanting someone to suffer does not make my life better. It just makes me bitter and tired." She pushed the container toward him. "These are cookies. My mother sent the recipe from Earth. They are made with chocolate, which comes from a plant that is poisonous to some species but delicious to humans." Stared at the cookies. "You brought me food." "Sharing food is how humans build trust," said. "It is ancient, older than writing or cities or even language. When we share food with someone, we are saying, 'I do not want you to go hungry. I care about your survival.' It is a small thing, but small things matter." Hesitated. Then slowly he reached out and took a cookie. He bit into it carefully, ready to spit it out if it tasted wrong. It did not taste wrong. It was sweet and rich, with a flavor unlike anything he had experienced before. It was good. "This is strange," he said. "Most things worth experiencing are strange at first," replied. She took a cookie for herself and bit into it. "Now, let me tell you about Earth. The real Earth, not the from your nightmares. Let me tell you about summer camps and birthday parties and the way the ocean looks at sunset. Let me tell you about the music we make and the stories we tell and the art we create. Let me tell you about the humans who are kind and generous and brave, who spend their lives helping others and expecting nothing in return." She talked for 3 hours, listened. When the session ended, he stood up slowly. He looked at with an expression she could not quite read. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I do not know if I was wrong about all humans, but I was wrong about you." "That is a start," said. "Come back next week. We have a lot more to cover." Nodded, he walked to the door, then stopped and turned back. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me." "That is what we do," said. "We survive impossible things and then we forgive. It is the only reason we made it off that alive." Left, sat alone in the small room looking at the empty cookie container. Outside the window, 2 moons rose over Academy, painting the world in silver and gold. The lesson had finally ended, but the learning was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, something changed at the Academy. Word spread about testimony about her choice to defend the student who had threatened her. Some thought she was foolish. Others thought she was brave, but everyone talked about it. And slowly, carefully, other students began to approach her. They asked questions about Earth, about humans, about that had produced such a strange and stubborn species. They listened to her answers. They shared their own stories. Came to every session. He learned about human history, both the violence and the kindness. He learned about the wars and the treaties, the cruelties and the compassions. He learned that humans were not monsters. They were just people, complicated and messy, and trying their best in a universe that did not make it easy. By the end of the semester, he called his friend. Ambassador Ani watched it all from her office window. She had been worried about the human integration experiment. She had thought it might fail. But watching walk across the courtyard, surrounded now by students from a dozen different species, she began to think she had been wrong. Maybe the experiment would succeed after all, not because humans were special or superior, but because they refused to give up, because they looked at impossible situations and chose hope over despair, because they survived and forgave enemies and shared cookies with people who had threatened to kill them. Because they were human. And that, Ani decided, was something worth understanding.